Hey guys, it's Taylor from Taylor Franta Photography. In my last video, I showed you my favorite sharpening technique to restore some detail in images. This week, I'm going to show you my favorite technique in bringing down the highlights in an image. There are multiple ways to do this, but of all the techniques that I've used, this one's been my most successful and the one that I use the most frequently. So I'm going to start off with a picture that I took in Savannah, Georgia. Now you'll see the sky over here is overexposed, it's too bright, and the attention is drawn too much to that area. I really wanted the attention to be more in the city itself. So I'll show you this technique here. You're going to want to take your layer and duplicate it. Change the blend mode to multiply. You'll see when I do this, the picture gets a lot darker. We're basically going to just apply this darkening to the bright areas of the image. So from here, you want to add a mask, and then go to Image and Apply Image, and make sure Invert is not checked for this. Now you'll see once this loads here, the difference that it will make in this picture. So I'll turn the layer off and then on, and you'll see it's really restoring some of the details in these highlights, and it's adding some saturation back in there as well. It's even affecting the lights in the city, which isn't a bad thing. I think it looks good for this image. But let's say we want to affect it even further. We can duplicate this layer to apply the effect again, and now the city lights look too dark. So what I'm going to do is hold Alt and click on this mask here. You can see the mask that it's using, and with the brush selected, we can just brush out some of these areas that we don't want the effect applied to. Now I'm just doing this crudely. I would usually pay more attention to it, but this is just for the sake of the video. Now you'll see with this effect is just affecting the lights up in the sky here because I painted out those city areas. So here's the before and here's the after. You'll see it's adding a lot of detail back into those clouds, giving some saturation and just giving the image more pop in general. Now here's a picture that I took at Lake Jocassee in South Carolina, and I'm going to apply that effect. Now if you remember, this effect really increases the saturation as well. This is already an overly saturated image, so that's going to create a problem, as you'll see when I apply this. So you'll see it did bring down the brights in the sky, but it almost made it too saturated. Now it was an unbelievable sunset, but it did not look like this. So one thing we can do, since we already have a mask here, we can press Control and highlight that mask, and then you can create a vibrance layer, and you'll see when I drag the saturation over that will start to decrease the saturation just in those highlight areas. So we can decrease those to our liking, basically. But you'll see that we can now control, we can restore those highlights and keep the saturation under control. In my next image, I already have the effect applied here, but this is a picture that I took in South Carolina of some shrimp boats, and I really wanted to create a moody, contrasty picture, but the brights are still too overwhelming here. So I apply this effect, and you'll see it brings down those brights just like before, but it's almost too much. So with this picture, all I'm going to do is decrease the opacity of that layer to where I like it. So this is personal preference, but about right here. So you'll see the before and after. It's not really darkening any of these corner areas, it's just bringing down those brights, which are too distracting it. So the last picture I'm going to show you is one that I took at Toro Weep in the Grand Canyon. Now this picture, I really like how bright the foreground is, but the sky is just overwhelming. So again, we're going to apply the same effect, duplicate our layer, multiply, add a mask, and apply image. And you'll see when I did that, that it is bringing down the brightness in the foreground, which is not something that I wanted. So I'll show you what we can do. You can hit Alt again and press that layer, and you can see the mask. Now go to Apply Image again, and you'll see we're now almost entirely cutting out the foreground here. So now when we apply it, it's still darkening the foreground, but not near as much as before. And again, that sky is a little bright, so we can duplicate this and even bring out more detail in the clouds. So you'll see, here's the before. You can't see really any clouds in here, and it's just overwhelming. And the after, where we have some added saturation and you can see the detail in those clouds and it's not quite as overwhelming. So it's a technique that I love. It really adds some extra pop to the images, and I apply it to an extent to almost every image that I take just to control those highlights. Sometimes I may just apply it faintly, bring that opacity down. In some images, such as this one, I'll use the effect multiple times. But you can really play around with how many times you choose to use the apply image with the opacity, and then you can fine-tune it with the paintbrush as well, and I really fine-tune that mask. But it's been the most successful technique that I've used, so I really hope you guys enjoyed this technique. Please share in the comments below some of the techniques that you use to bring down the highlights and recover some of those areas. But it seems so many people rush into using HDRs these days when it's really not necessary. And in many instances, there are instances where it still is warranted, but with the dynamic range that cameras are capable of these days, it's not always necessary. You can really bring down those highlights and bring up those shadows a lot more than you would think. So I urge you guys to experiment with your pictures, try this technique, see if it works with any of them, and please let me know what you guys thought, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.